everyone, Kate here to show you my 2020 TBR stack. This was talked about in my reading goals for the year, and there is a project going around on Instagram, and I've seen some people on YouTube, BookTube also doing it, called 20 in 2020, where you pick 20 books off your TBR stack. And that's what it was going to be, but you know me, I just love these lofty reading goals, and I don't know if I'll get through all of these, but I genuinely am interested in reading all of them, so we'll see how I do. We'll see how this goes, and I'll just get into all the books. I am doing this to be like Leanne from Literary Diversions. She does her stack at TBRs, where she stacks them in a specific order, and as she gets to each book, she either has to read it or DNF it. She can't change the order. And so I thought I would do that for my year's stack at TBR. And so I just thought it's a really fun project that she does. I will, of course, link one of her TBRs that she does in the description box if you want to see it. And so with each book, I either have to read it or DNF it. So DNFs are totally allowed, and I have stacked them strategically. So hopefully as the year progresses, I'm happy with the order. I do like to be a seasonal reader. There's different kinds of books I'm in the mood for, depending on the time of year. And so we are starting with the winter stack, the January and onwards stack, and I will show you the books. The first is called Mrs. Mike. This is by Benedict and Nancy Freedman. And I'm pretty sure this is nonfiction. It's about a couple in Canada, and he is a Mountie, and they are newlyweds, and his wife relocates to where he is a Mountie, and it's about the first years of their marriage, and it's supposed to be kind of like a really challenging, isolated landscape where they live. Where does it say? He's a sergeant in the Canadian Mounted Police, but it doesn't say. Oh, she moves from Boston and she arrives in Calgary, Alberta. So it was this kind of obscure classic that I found at a library book sale, and it just sounds really good. It was published in, let me tell you when it was published. 1947. So something I never heard of, and it seems like my kind of book, and we will see what I think about it. Next is Here Are Lovers by Hilda Vaughan. This is published by Hano Classics, and this is an Edwardian book that is set in the Victorian era. So I think it will be really interesting to kind of see that dynamic in there. This was published in 1914, and I think from the synopsis it looks to be somewhat of a tragic love story, but I've really been impressed by all the other books I've read by Hano Press, so I'm looking forward to reading this one. And I have never read anything by Hilda Vaughan, so looking forward to trying her out. And then I have And the Ladies of the Club by Helen Hoover Santmyer. This is quite the book. So I did try to also space out my chunkers, so I'm not just reading one chunker after another. This is over 1,400 pages. This is really long, and it is about, I can't tell you the era. I think it's early 1900s, set in Ohio, and it's just this really big epic domestic novel, and it was a bestseller at the time when it was published. 1984. So yes, it's, oh wait, just a second. It has the date right there on the first chapter. 1868 is when it starts, and it goes until the 30s, until the 1930s, and it looks like it is a ladies' club in this small town. And so I think it's the conversations and the relationships, the dynamics that happen from this ladies' club in the town. And next on the list is The Fountain Overflows by Rebecca West. This is a book I have really been wanting to read for such a very long time. I started it years and years ago and got distracted, but Rebecca West is such a reputable author. I really do want to read her, and it's about a family that has gone through hard times. This is one of the New York Review books, and if you ever happen upon one of their books, you should definitely pick it up if the plot intrigues you, because they are such sturdy books, and the paper is really soft. I love it. So this was first published in 1956. So I want to read The Fountain Overflows. Then I want to finally read the next I can't remember the name of the series, but first is The Pursuit of Love. Next one is called Love in a Cold Climate, and I really enjoyed The Pursuit of Love, and I've been meaning to pick this up in wintertime, and then winter passes and I haven't gotten to it another year. So hopefully it's this winter that I get to it. Then I have a James Michener. This is Chesepeake. I finally found a James Michener in a trade paperback size, and so I thought it was meant to be, and especially New England setting that goes from, it starts in the 1600s and goes for 400 years, so till modern day. And I think that will be really interesting to read. It seems like to have a really varied cast. It says there are people escaping religious persecution in England. So John Smith is going to be there, and then there are going to be pirates, planters, slaves, abolitionists, Quakers, notorious politicians. So a real mixture of characters in there. I am also planning on doubling up with the audiobook, so maybe taking 3 or 4 days and just really trying to blast through this. And hopefully, if I enjoy it, that won't be hard. I just hear so much about James Michener's historical fiction, so I definitely want to read Chesepeake. And then we have the next in the Mapp and Lucia series by E Benson, Lucia in London, Mapp and Lucia. These are just the most hilarious modern classics. I love the dynamics of these different characters. And so we haven't actually seen them meet yet, because in the first 2 books, you see them before they're living in the same town. And let's see. It doesn't say the town that they're living in. I've already forgotten it, but they're going to live in the same town, and I think really clash because they both want to run the show. So it will be interesting. And then I have the Mrs. Arris Goes to New York. I read a few years ago Mrs. Arris Goes to Paris, and I loved that one so much. And these are also modern classics. And this one was published in 1960 by Paul Gallico. So looking forward to getting to that. Then I have here ShowBoat by Edna Ferber. This is about a boat that sails down the Mississippi and stops periodically and does shows for people. And I loved Giant by Edna Ferber. And what is the name of the main character? Magnolia Hawk. And so she falls in love, and they move to Chicago, and then I think there's going to be drama in their marriage. This was written in 1926. Then I have Joy in the Morning by Betty Smith. This is another book in my stack about a young married couple in the first years of their marriage. He is going to graduate school, and so finances are really, really tight. But I think it's a book of how they have all these trials and they grow closer together, and it just sounds like a really sweet read. Betty Smith is the author of A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, so I definitely want to try another by her. And then I have here, it has been too long since I've read a Willa Cather, and I really liked her when I read her for the first time. So I have The Song of the Lark, and there is a Great Plains trilogy that Willa Cather has written, and My Antonia and O Pioneers are the other 2 in the trilogy, and I have read those, so it only makes sense that the next Willa Cather I pick up will be The Song of the Lark. And then we have one that, again, for years I've been meaning to read in wintertime, and that is Peace Like a River by Leif Enger. And this is Katie from Life Between Words, one of her absolute favorite books. It's kind of this epic adventure tale, very bittersweet, very true to life, and I think there's going to be just some really moving moments in it. It's got kind of a Western feel to it. It's this adventure across country. So they're in the Midwest, and then they go on a cross-country search for his outlaw older brother who's been controversially charged with murder. So it sounds very gripping. Next, I have a gift from Kate from the novel Nomad, and that is The Silver Well. This is a collaborative effort by Kate Forsyth and Kim Wilkins, and it's a group of fairy tales. So I thought winter seemed a really nice time to read this collection of fairy tale short stories. It seems like a really, really nice thing to read. Then I have next an Elizabeth Goudge, because it's been too long since I've read Elizabeth Goudge, and this is Island Magic. So it's going to be set on this island. There is a shipwrecked man that takes refuge in some of the main characters' houses, and it just looks like it's going to be really good. So I would love to read an Elizabeth Goudge. On to the summer stack, and I have 2 more Willa Cathers, and the first is A Lost Lady, and then I have One of Ours. So I own a fair number of Willa Cather. I just picked the ones that were rated like the next highest on Goodreads. So One of Ours and A Lost Lady. And then a modern classic that I just hear so many good things about, that is The Diary of a Provincial Lady by E.M. Delafield. And these are diary entries. That's the format. So I think it could be really fun to dip in and out of. It's quite chunky because it's 4 little books put together, and it just looks really great. Then I have Elizabeth von Arnim. The last Elizabeth von Arnim that I read was Vera, and it is one of the strangest books I think I've ever read, and unfortunately I really didn't like it. So I want to kind of redeem my love for Elizabeth von Arnim and pick up Fräulein Schmidt and Mr. Anstruther. I hear such good things about this, and it's about the relationship of these 2 friends, and it's written in letters, if I am correct. Yes, it's written in letters, which I think can be a really, really just lovely way to read a book. Then one that I heard about from the modern Mrs. Darcy is News of the World, and it is set in a time when there were town criers going from town to town, sharing the news that people needed to know, and it's just supposed to be a really, really great read. Then I have Greenery Street by Denise McCall, and this is a Persephone classic, in case you couldn't tell, and it is about a young married couple in the early years of their marriage. So maybe, I don't know, maybe I would wait and do a triple book review. We'll see what I think. Then I have a Eudora Welty, a Mississippi author, because I'm a Mississippi girl and I have just been meaning to read her for years. This is Delta Wedding, so this book is going to be all like over the course of one weekend, and all of these different relatives and friends coming together for the weekend. So I think it's a domestic novel, but I don't know for sure. We'll see. After I read it, I will report back what I find. Then we have an Elizabeth Taylor, who I meant to read her last year and didn't, so I'm putting it in my stack this year. Mrs. Palfrey at the Claremont. I've been told I will love Elizabeth Taylor, and this is a modern classic. So this came out 1971 is when this was published, and it's just supposed to be this woman who lives at the Claremont Hotel and kind of the relationships that she has. Can't not go a whole year without reading a Susanna Kearsley, so I have Bellwether. I kind of have dropped off, Robin and I have kind of dropped off our project of reading one every month, but that's not because I don't want to, it's just other reading stuff, you know, other reading goals. So I definitely want to keep reading through Susanna Kearsley, maybe just at a slower pace, and then I can savor the books longer. Then I have an Angela Thirkell, because I think summer is a great time to pick up an Angela Thirkell, and I have Northbridge Rectory, and this is going to be during World War II. So this will be the first Barsetshire novel that I've read that is set during during World War II. The other ones have all been during peacetime. Then I have a book by Sarah Orne Jewett, The Country of the Pointed Firs, and selected short fiction. So The Country of the Pointed Firs is a really short novella. I think it's like 150 pages. And then the rest of the short stories in here are set in that same world. But Sarah Orne Jewett is an author I hadn't heard of. I just saw this in a used bookstore. I picked it up. She wrote in the late 1800s and into the early 1900s, and she lived in Maine. So that's where The Country of the Pointed Firs is set. Then I have an Elizabeth Bowen, another author I've been meaning to get to for so long, and I have The Death of the Heart. Elizabeth Bowen was an Irish author, and this is published in 1938, and it's about, I think, kind of tragic love and culture clash. Someone from Dublin moves to London and sort of the culture shock that they have while they're there. Next, I have an Elizabeth Goudge, and that is Towers in the Mist. So I did put 2 Elizabeth Goudge in here because I didn't read any for her last year, so I guess I'm trying to make up for it now. But this is Towers in the Mist, and this is set in Elizabethan Oxford, which I think sounds fascinating, and I just love her books. And then I have the final 2 in the Mapp and Lucia series by E Benson. So I would love to just have this series read by the end of the year. I've been wanting to read it for so long, so it's included in this stack. And then I have Cold Sassy Tree by Olive Ann Burns. This is a Southern modern classic. I've just been told time and time again is such a good book, and so I really need to give this a read this year. It is going to happen. I'm going to read Cold Sassy Tree, and I can't wait to tell you all about it. And then I have Old School by Tobias Wolff, and this is a book that's set in an all-boys boarding school in England, and it's a really slim little volume. It is not even 200 pages, so this would not take a long time to get through, and let's hope that I do. We are on to the final part of the stack, so thank you for bearing with me if you have. And the first one in this stack is Crossing to Safety by Wallace Stegner. Wallace Stegner is one of those authors that I keep needing to read. I started Big Rock Candy Mountain last year, and I really liked what I read, and then just got sidetracked by Victober and other things. So I might be picking that up as well, but Crossing to Safety is also a really famous one. So we'll see how much Wallace Stegner I read, but hopefully minimum of Crossing to Safety. Then I have a fairy tale retelling, SnowWhite and Rosered. I did not realize until a little while ago that there is a fairy tale totally separate from the Snow White fairy tale with, you know, biting the apple and the seven dwarves. That's called SnowWhite and Rosered, about two sisters. And this is by Patricia C. Reedy, and who wrote the Enchanted Forest Chronicles, the An Enchantment of Dragons, that series, which I have only heard bits of the audiobook while my 5-year-old listens. So those haven't really intrigued me, but I think maybe this would, hopefully. I just want, you know, fairy tale retellings are ones that I love to read at least a couple in a year. And then I have Tim Winton's Cloud Street. This is a book that, or an author that I keep hearing talked about. He's a really well-known Australian author, and I would love to give this novel a try. This, I think, is his most famous, and it's a family saga. So it's really, I would love to just really relish in a good family saga. And then, getting later into the year for when we're back to school, I would love to read To Serve Them All My Days by R.F. Delderfield. This is a book about a veteran of the Great War coming to serve at an all-boys boarding school, and sort of the relationships that he forms, and kind of how it's this time of healing for him. And it just sounds like a really great novel. And this is, it was done on Masterpiece Theater a while back. And this is written, 1971 is when it was first published. I thought it was earlier than that, but 1971. And then I have The Flame Trees of Thika by Elspeth Huxley. I had a false start with this with Emma from Bookish Princess, but she has just made it sound so good. The first chapter was really off-putting to me, something about the style, and so I think the first chapter isn't really enough to tell whether or not you're going to like a book. So I want to give this book another try. And then I have Like Water for Chocolate by Laura Esquerel. And this is just one of those books I hear so many good things about. It's supposed to be really fun and winsome, and it's got lots of great female friendship with the women in this one family, and it just sounds really good. So I want to read Like Water for Chocolate. And then I have The Remains of the Day by Kazuo Ishiguro. And then I also have next in the stack, The Buried Giant by Kazuo Ishiguro. So I figured if I DNF one of them, then maybe I would like the other one, if that makes sense. So hopefully I do. Next, I have The Young Clementina by D.E. Stevenson. It is about the main character named Charlotte, who loves her little quiet life that she lives in her flat in London, and then her sister shows up one day and kind of throws everything into chaos. But D.E. Stevenson's Miss Bunkle's book that's put out by Persephone Books, I loved. So I was excited to get several of these are put out by Source Books, and I want to read them because I've owned them for several years now. Next, I have Walking as He Walked by Joel Beakey. So this is a book that is kind of countering the idea of the prosperity gospel, almost, that like if you just have faith, you'll only have good things happen in your life, and kind of that you should really count the cost and not expect things to be super easy in life, because life is unfair. Life is unfair. So I've heard very good things about it. And then I have Mr. Pip, a novel by Lloyd Jones, about a teacher who lives on this island and reads Great Expectations to the children. So I want to read this. And a movie adaptation came out several years ago with Hugh Laurie as the teacher. So I want to read that. And then lastly, Echoes of Eden by Jerram Bars. This is a theologian's take on Shakespeare, Harry Potter, Jane Austen, and C.S. Lewis's world. So kind of how you can see a biblical worldview through their literature. I hope I conveyed that right. that's my big old stack. We'll see how I do getting through it. I hope you enjoyed watching that. I enjoyed telling you about it. And so yeah, I will probably hopefully do some Stack It updates throughout the year. But I will be back for another video soon. Have a lovely day.